Hello and welcome to On Landscape. We're here for our Any Questions session with myself, Tim Parkin, and Joe Cornish, and our special guest, Ben Horne, dialing in from San Diego. Hello, Ben.
Hi, it's great to chat today.
Yeah, well, we got in the format, we've got 4 or 5 questions from that people have submitted in, but I'm really interested in talking to Ben about uh, his working practice because it's not normal. You're not normal, are you, Ben? Really? Is
I
that
am very not
safe to
normal.
say?
I've made a career of not being normal, which is good. Less competition that way.
Absolutely. Normality is overrated, definitely. So, as a little bit about what that means, is you are primarily a film photographer. I imagine you use your phone every now and again or a little camera to take the odd picture, but most of your output is 10 by 8 and
Yes.
on transparency and color negative film.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the phone is certainly a great tool for like scouting and pictures of the cat and the dog and vacation stuff like that. Um, but yeah, working with the large format, which I know that both of you guys have experience with that. It's something that I think it was back in 2007 I started doing that, and it has a different way of thinking that allows me to be more satisfied with my work and take less pictures but have a higher keeper rate. And
I
I've just
remember your
really,
initial videos from when you were using a 5.4 camera or playing around. Did you play around with
yeah,
medium format first?
just for a brief amount of time. Well, I had
Yeah,
a panoramic camera, the Fuji panoramic
that's right.
camera,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
was fun, but ultimately I just didn't use it enough. But yeah, I started with the 5x4. It was just a quick little stepping stone to realize I wanted to go to the 10x8. But yeah, it's I don't know. It really forces me to slow down. It forces me to think through the process. It forces me to think through a composition all the way. Um, but I think one of the other things too is it allows me to realize that there are so many things that I cannot photograph, and
Yeah.
like things that are moving quickly, things were just depth of field limitations. And rather than feeling like I am, you know, not able to, it narrows it narrows what I can work with and what I can photograph, and it allows me to kind of concentrate more on that and feel less bummed about missing like a sunrise or a sunset or something like that, because I can just
Restrictions
sit
are good for
there.
the creative brain, definitely.
Yeah. It's those limitations, those guardrails. I think are have
As a
been
brief
very
aside,
nice.
you're
Yeah,
mentioning using the digital camera and the phone for taking pictures of dogs and cats. Have you ever tried taking a picture of your pets with a 10 by 8 camera?
I've actually considered it because my wife and I, we have two cats, one of which is 12, one is 11, so they're getting up there. And I'm like, it would be cool because they're not going to be around forever. It'd be cool to have like a big transparency of them, but just
Yeah.
logistically, a cat
Managed it
somehow
once myself with
somehow giving
5.4.
it enough light, which probably mean a strobe, which I don't think the cat would appreciate. I just think it would be a recipe for disaster.
An expensive recipe for
A
disaster.
very expensive one. So I have not, but I think that it would be cool. I've actually considered it, but it would be, I think it would be difficult. Yeah.
Ben, you mentioned transparency, that I'm very intrigued to know. I mean, I'm sure we need Tim's questions as well, but um, transparency is all negative. There's a first question for you. Which way do you generally swing with your film?
I love transparency just because you can look at it and know exactly what you have. It's not as forgiving as the color negative, but I think for a lot of stuff that I work with, um, just transparency is just better for that. But like, I'll come back from a trip and I just have, images to sort through, figure out which one's best. And I love that. But I think one of the things if a person has not worked with large format before and they haven't had this experience, but putting a transparency on a light box and looking through it with a loop, it tricks your brain into thinking you're looking at reality, which is, it's almost like those old like Viewmasters. I don't know, where you kind of like
Yeah.
click it and it shows you different scenes. It's like that, but you can just like sit there and look at everything. So I absolutely love transparency. but it's more expensive. It's gotten really expensive in the past.
On that
10
note,
years in particular.
some of our readers won't understand some of the cost implications involved in taking a single frame with a 10x8 camera. Can you give us a rough?
Yeah,
rundown?
so a box of 20 sheets of film is about $400 now. And processing is, I think, like $12 or so. So, every click of the shutter is going to be $32. And, if I'm going on a backpacking trip and I only have very, very limited film with me, yes, taking one photo of a subject, I'm good with that. But typically I do want to have a little bit of like a backup. So I might shoot 2 sheets, or there's a sunrise progressing. I'll take, quite a few. So yeah, it's expensive, but I find that for even at the end of the year when I do all my taxes and I look at the expense for film, and then I look at what I'm able to do with that in terms of generating income, it still makes sense for me.
Sorry, I'd say that the interesting thing about that, though, is that every time you click the shutter, Ben, it's the price of a sort of medium priced meal out. And so if you take 2 exposures, it's a meal for 2.
Yeah, and that's why I don't eat on my trips.
Good tactics.
Yeah. But it is. But when you're out there, I don't think about the cost. I think about it when I order the film, but I don't really think about it when I'm in the field. It's just, oh, the light's changing. Let me grab another film holder and throw it in there. When I was in Death Valley earlier this year, there was this sunrise I was photographing. Now, I don't do a lot of sunrises just because it's logistically, it's kind of hard to do with the large format. You can't really see the ground glass and setting up in the dark and all that. But I saw some clouds in the morning. I get up really early, like 4 something in the morning. I get up, I see some clouds in the sky, which isn't very common for a sunrise in Death Valley. And so I remember there's this one particular desert holly bush that was not far from the road, but it was like 20, 30 miles from where I was camping. So I drove down there, set up the camera in the dark, and just took photos at the various windows of light, the kind of the blue hour, and then a little bit of glow in the mountains. And then as the clouds are moving, I think I exposed maybe 6 sheets of film or something like that. And I had 1 left. And I'm like, all right, I might as well do this one. I exposed that last one, and that was the photo. That was the good one. All the other ones didn't count, know. So then when I sit and do the math on that, I'm like, all right, so it's like 30 times 6. This is not great. But somehow it works out in the end.
Yeah. You can't think about it too much, can you? Out of interest, if you do take multiple exposures, one of the things for the people watching this, you can have 2 tactics. One is you can bracket, so you can over and under expose, or you can take one, and then depending on the result of that one, you can send another one to the lab and have the lab adjust it for you.
That means you have to be very well organized, which is, I'm the type that just like, I don't really pay attention to which film holder I'm using other than just knowing which film is in there.
It is hard work.
But I'm just juggling things. But yes, I know that technique. I don't have the discipline for that.
So
one thing I do though is I will meter scene, take the photo, then meter the scene again. And if it still looks good, then I usually have pretty good confidence in what I did. And if I want to expose another sheet of film, I'll just do the exact same exposure. But that does give me the opportunity to fine tune things a little bit after the fact if I do another one. I definitely don't really think about the money, the expense while in the field. But it is a lot. I did the math on like one of the Fuji medium format digital camera, the GFX 100 something or other. I think that was 3 years worth of film. It was something like that.
It's about 3 years. I've looked at that before now as well.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, oh, that's yeah.
And that's ignoring lenses, etc. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I hate to say this, but that's exact same calculation that I did when I first invested in the phase 1. So I figured that the way I shot 5.4, and for the kind of work I was doing at the time, that I would get my money back in about 3 years. So that was what happened.
Did you find that when you went to the phase 1 that you shot the same number of pictures, or did you increase it a bit? How did that vary your experience in the field?
It did change it, but I mean, in a way, there's no direct comparison that you can really make. And of course, it's very different to shooting 10.8, which is significantly, I mean, so much larger. I mean, Tim and I discussed this previously, that if you think in terms of the, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, Ben, but 10.8 is 4 times the surface area of 4x5, so it's enormously more detail and resolution and cost, of course, way beyond what most people would ever empirically need. But of course, that's one of the lovely things about 10.8. It's so extravagant. It's unnecessarily extravagant, which is wonderful. Whereas,
coming back to what you said about number of compositions, having seen you when you were taking film and seen you when you were using the medium format digital, I think you take about the same amount of compositions. You do a couple of variations on things, or maybe take a couple of extra exposures, but in terms of raw compositions, picking and choosing, it's not far
I
off.
don't think that has actually changed very much. I think it became such a kind of habituated to the kind of discipline of seeing. And then actually, I love to work slowly. I'm just not, I don't know, maybe I'm just not fast enough in my brain to work more quickly anyway. So in many ways, large format really suits and still suits me. It's just, I use a technical camera, so that side of it is pretty much the same. In many ways, it's probably a little bit quicker, certainly than using a 10.8. And as you probably can imagine, Ben, shooting 10x8 in the UK would be a different story, I would say, to working in the desert Southwest, where the weather is generally, I'd say, a lot more benign, and you don't have to contend with 30-mile-an-hour winds as the normal.
Those are the days when I just relax, or maybe I'll just go out in the wind and jump up and down and see where I land. If I land a few feet from where I was, that's always kind of fun.
I have seen a picture of you with your tripod actually screwed into the ground with a cable.
I learned the hard way.
Wow.
I destroyed 2 cameras. Almost a third. The wind almost got my camera again this past November. It got slammed to the ground, but somehow it survived. But that's not my backup camera.
Is that the Chamonix?
The Chamonix Alpinist X,
which looks really nice.
Yeah, it's a great camera, and I don't know how it survived. It got slammed down on the solid rock, and it dinged it a little bit. There was one part I had to fix with some wood glue. That's now my backup camera. I bought another one as a replacement. But one thing when you're talking about like the various sort of compositions and working a scene, one thing that I find really beneficial with working with the 10x8 that I have is that you can't, it's especially the lenses that I have are really slow, so the image on the ground glass is really dim, and you can't see your composition very well by looking at the back of the camera, and you can't even see it all at once. And so I always use a little framing device I hold up, and I just find the exact best place to put the camera, and then I just sit there and wait. I usually try to get there ahead of the light and then just wait for the light to be good. And it is the most serene experience to be like standing out on the salt flat somewhere and know that you have a composition that's dialed in, balanced as much as it could be, camera's placed as good as it could be, and you just wait for the light and you just stand next to the camera and you click the shutter. And I think that's one of the other things too, is that, I can, even if it's seen like in a canyon somewhere and, the light's not changing, but I know that I have the camera the best. I kind of weighed all the variables for the composition. I can take the picture, one click, and then walk away, packing up my camera and such, but I can walk away knowing that I feel like I did my job there, as opposed to continuously working the scene and try to figure out, take a picture here, move here. And there very well could be a better solution, but I'm very happy with the solution that I have from that scene, and I can walk away with it feeling like I did the best that I could. And I think that's the other aspect of working with the equipment I have, where it's, hard to see through the viewfinder, but it makes you think a little bit more in that sense, which gives that greater sense of satisfaction with the work. So that's the other part of it that I really do enjoy.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. Actually, lovely to hear, because it shows how much the process is absolutely the heart of the making of an image. And in many ways, the images are sort of a kind of benign byproduct of the process.
Yeah,
So the
that's
process,
very
very much
true.
the
It is
practice.
very much about the process for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and how actually it's very a kind of therapeutic thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that you're forced to slow down, to be in the moment. Sometimes you have to just wait and watch the light change, and sometimes it doesn't change much. Sometimes it changes quickly. I mean, there is inherently there are cultural differences, I think, inevitably, and some of them are to do with the fact that working in the Western states in particular, you do have wind sometimes, of course, but there's a lot of very benign, having worked out there, lots of shelter, especially if you're in canyons. And there's something incredibly calm about being surrounded by this epic beauty
Oh, yeah.
and sculpture, living sculpture of the rock. And it's a very special experience. When for most of us, most of the time, we're working out on open moorlands or mountains, sometimes by a lake or on the coast. It's a very different kind of atmosphere. There's lots of wonderful photographic opportunities too, but they usually come with wind and tides and
Yeah.
rain and all sorts of stuff that makes it slightly
Oh, yeah.
less meditative.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, I can just think through some of the times when I've been in situations where there's been wind or weather or stuff like that, and it's not conducive at all for the type of photography I do. I have mad respect for, I mean, you see these absolutely beautiful scenes with this, the light that just lasts a little bit, and then all the weather coming in, and I look at that, I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'll stick
You,
to some rocks on the ground. They don't move as much.
you imagine those Icelandic photographers in the winter, with their incredible, wind speeds and still coming back sometimes with amazing pictures. So, but it's a very different thing. But it just goes to show, doesn't it? I suppose.
I remember me and you going to Iceland and hardly being able to get out of the car, and we still had to struggle with the large format cameras. It was quite entertaining, like maneuvering a sail on a tripod.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not. Yeah, that would be very very different. I'm very much a fair weather photographer, and I think some people might think that sounds like an insult, like, oh, you're not going out for the good stuff. But like, I need to be in like a particular state of mind to be productive, and also in some of the places I go, it absolutely has to be fair weather. Like, I go backpacking every spring into these canyons in southern Utah, and it would be a
Rain
very
would be bad.
dangerous place to be if it rained.
Very, very dangerous. Yeah,
Yes.
very dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, there. I mean, the one of the canyons. I mean, I went to the next year and there's 3 cottonwood trees that were missing. So
Wow.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. But during when the weather is nice, it's not too hot out yet. The weather is calm. It's absolutely peaceful down in there. But that's the only side I've really seen of that place, and I would imagine it would probably be very miserable, very scary certain times of
Yeah.
the year. But if anything is those sort of conditions, I have no real desire to try to capture it. I just need to have like a really specific mindset, um, calm surroundings. Kind of, I sort of feel that sense of calm, and hopefully that leads me to subjects, and it kind of comes through in the work. So I'll
Well, it
take a
certainly
tree
does
on a
that. I mean,
windless morning.
your work is, yeah, it's really kind of notable for the sense of peace and calm and harmony in
Oh,
it, I
thank you.
think, and that's a wonderful quality, and I'm sure that's a big basis for the popularity of your work. I'm not sure if popularity is something you're particularly searching even for, but I mean, nevertheless, it's work that you can relate to on that level very much, I think. So
Yeah, I
yeah, big
appreciate that.
kudos.
And the other thing too, I found is that when a print, and I'm sure you guys have the same experience, but when you do make a larger print, I don't do a lot of big prints, but when you do a large print, the more calm the scene, the better that print usually is. And so
Yeah.
sometimes an image that might seem kind of boring when seen small, when it's properly presented and printed large, they are some of the most calming images, and there's just so much depth to them, and I love that.
I think there's something really natural about the light dynamic range of transparency film as well. It's very similar to the reflective light you get off a painting or whatever.
Yes.
It's not trying to. You're not trying to suppress highlights or anything. If you get an intimate scene taken with that, it does look like a window into the world.
Yeah. And it also just makes the process way easier. It sounds weird for people that aren't familiar with it, but like, I look at what is done these days with digital and all the post processing that goes into stuff and all that work. Meanwhile, I just take a picture, I scan the film, maybe a couple small tweaks to if there's a weird little color cast or something, and that's about it. It doesn't really take a lot of work, and I have mad respect for people that have the ability to, take a scene and then really expertly work with everything and just make this absolutely beautiful print. But it is one of those things where, like, if I turn on my TV these days, I turn on the TV, then I have to hit quite a few button presses to navigate through the various apps, and it's like 20 presses of the button in order to watch a show. Versus the old days, you turn on the TV, one turn of a knob, it's on, you're watching something. So in some ways, it's a little bit like shooting film in that sense. And that's, I think, one of the things I do enjoy about it, just that process oriented approach. And it seems simpler, even though I think from the outside, it seems like a really bizarre and strange way of doing things. So
I tried to emulate the feeling or the approach of using a large format camera when I'm out with an SLR, digital SLR. And the one thing that I find really difficult more than anything else is committing after I've taken a photograph. Normally I'll find a composition in the same way as I would any other way. I'll get the scene, I'll work on it, and because I can take a photograph anytime I like, I'll take the photograph just to get, because I can. But then hanging around for the next half an hour waiting for the light because I know I've already got the picture in the bag.
yeah,
It's that commitment to wait for the next cycle of light to come through or for things to change that doesn't work. And so I find it really difficult to get past that.
Yeah. And also I think I find that through the years, I find that the more photos I have, the less I don't look at those photos as much with the same sort of respect as when I was first getting started with it. I think the more you have of something, the less you value it. Though when I go back, if there's a photo I took, let's say, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago that I liked at the time, I look at it now, I'm like, it's just another picture. It doesn't really mean as much to me anymore. But then if I go back and I revisit that scene, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, this photo like turned out really good. I'm very, very happy with how this turned out. But I do worry that if I were to, I don't shoot a lot of photos right now, but I feel like if I were to shoot a lot more photos, I would only further that, and it would just sort of take more of the specialness away from each of those images. I think I exposed 70 something sheets of film in this past year, which is a fair amount if one does the math.
How many trips was that over? What do you say?
What was that? How many trips?
How many trips would that be over?
4 trips.
4 trips.
One of which I only took one photo and nearly destroyed my camera afterwards.
Was that yeah.
That was the one. That photo turned out great though.
That's good.
Yeah. But I mean, my goal is if I get, because the way I do things with the print portfolios and stuff, I want to have 10 photos at the end of the year I'm happy with. And of that 70 something photos I take, a good chunk of those are redundant. Or, 2 photos of the same scene or photos of light changes or stuff along those lines. But I very easily come up with 10 photos I like each year. It's not like I have 20, I'm trying to whittle it down to 10, but I might have 10, 11, 12 I'm really happy with. I feel like if I was shooting more and if I was taking more photos of a particular scene, or if I was going on more trips, I think it would be too many photos and I would lose a sense of connection with the work. I'll hear people say like they wish they can go out all the time and gather new work. I'm good 3 times a year going out, and producing work, coming back, and then just spending time working on things. Everything else I have to do back at home. But I would worry that, and because I know I will get forced into a digital setup at some point, just because film availability and such. But I do worry that it'll have a negative impact on my work, because I would be shooting more and I would have less satisfaction with the work. That's kind of my fear if I ever end up going in that direction, which I probably will.
Out of interest, we do have one question regarding that. It's from Simon Gulliver, who asks, could you maintain your current approach, or what do you think would change if you did move, if film stopped being made and you had to move?
It would change a lot of stuff.
You would do now, and an idea what might change?
I think the way that I am able to earn an income is mostly entirely based on the fact that I'm shooting film. I think if I were to try to do what I do now and not shoot film, I think it would take away some part of the process, and it just wouldn't fit as much anymore. And I think there's, just because a photo is taken on film doesn't make it any, it's just different than digital. One's not better than for certain things, yes, sports on large format would be horrible. But just because a photo is shot on film doesn't make it any better or worse, whatever. But there's something about it where it's a physical thing that's created. It's a specific moment in time. There's more of a story behind it. And, going on a backpacking trip and having 10 sheets of film with me, and, that leading to whatever final work and the whole process, I think that it would be very difficult actually I'd have to change a lot in order to somehow make a living off photography.
So given the choice between going to a digital format, trying to use tilt shift medium format like or move into black and white, because black and white will always be around.
Yeah, that's very true. It definitely would.
Would you go black and white, do you think, or not?
Feel like that would also not do well for me.
Yeah.
I think people have a stronger connection to color work unless they look at it properly exhibited, like in a gallery, in which case black and white pictures I think are just hauntingly beautiful. But I think on first glance people they connect more with color work. But yeah, I don't know. That would be very difficult. And the places that I go are so well suited for color, and just I know the nuance of the light. I'd be like starting over, which is why I really haven't dabbled into it as much as I probably should. But I just feel like it would be really very difficult either way. So I'm really hoping that the transparency film stays there, and I got a freezer full of it.
I think it will, but
yeah, hopefully it'll just get more expensive, but
good, yeah.
It's already ridiculously expensive as is, and I'm still buying it. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I find this all absolutely fascinating listening to you, Ben, and it's quite inspiring. I actually really making me think, well, maybe I go back to my big cameras for a while. But the trouble that I had actually, because I guess I changed around what sort of 16, 17 years ago, and I was really struggling just to see well enough to focus the camera properly. A lot of the time, and actually the digital proved just as difficult up until relatively recently with the latest back, which are absolutely incredible. And really now that sort of solved that problem for me in terms of focus. But it's just so I do love using a wooden camera, and I really miss that. I'll be honest. There's lots of aspects of the digital workflow that work well for me. Because ultimately I want to print. That's the goal. So, clearly making a transparency is a sort of magical interface moment, and it's lovely. And I totally agree with you about the story of the process, because, people are, of course, impressed by the fact that you carry around such a big camera. But actually, for me, what makes it interesting is the fact that piece of film that you had in the camera is literally the piece is it's an artifact. So the
Yeah.
transparency becomes the artifact. So your archive, while people will be familiar with your work from maybe from YouTube and making prints, but really your ultimate archive is that transparency archive. You know,
Yeah.
in years to come, if you look after those transparencies, people will get an enormous thrill, maybe after you're gone, looking at those transparencies and thinking, wow, that was in the back of Ben Horne's camera when he made that. And that's different with a print because it's not the artifact that was the witness to those photons, which the film
Yeah.
is.
I love the story, the fact that, that particular film, I loaded it in a film holder. I hiked it into some canyon in the middle of nowhere, waited for just the right time, load the film holder. It saw light for just a split second and then back into the darkness. And then, that film journeyed from, Japan to, my house, hiked into the area, back, film lab. So it's like, it's just it's a physical item that has actual story to it. One of the things I started doing just for fun, because I have obviously a lot of photos that don't turn out great, bad exposure, wind gust, stuff like that. I have a Patreon, and just for kicks, I created a tier called "I Give a Sheet," where I take a sheet of film that didn't turn out right. It's not a usable image. It may still be a good exposure. Just maybe there's wind blur or something weird going on. And I mail those to people if they're on at that tier. But I have to keep it very. I think I have it like 6 spots in that because I have to make sure I take enough bad photos in order to fill that. But if I have a perfect year, I don't do well. So I need to make sure I have some bad images. But just the fact that a person will get that, something that otherwise would have been in my closet taking up space because I don't really want to throw it away, but at least someone can look at it and they have that image where they have, here's the physical thing, here's the sense of story behind it. And that's one of the things I really do love about that. And then they can have that experience of putting a loop on it, looking at it in a light box and seeing it. So, but yeah, maybe if I took more bad photos, I could produce more of those and I could make more money.
I'll tell you what, you're giving me some ideas here. I've got 10,000 bad transparencies sitting on
That's not a bad thought, Joe. I think people will be interested.
Hey, there's something to it. So
thanks for the tip.
It's just a matter of being resourceful and trying to find some way to pay the bills in the
food on the
very
table.
lucrative landscape photography world. Yeah.
I've got a question from Martin Longstaff about your trips. He says, I'd love to know why you visited the redwood trees in California on a couple of occasions, then decided against visiting them again. Was there any particular reason, or is that?
Yeah, two reasons. First of all, it's really hard to take photos there. Really hard. And also, it's a really long drive.
Right.
That's like a 14, 15-hour drive. And I have to go through 2 metro areas. I have to go through the Los Angeles area and the San Francisco area. And so it's a punishing drive, and it's just really hard to take photos there. I do want to go back, but I know that I can be far more productive going to that same time of year is when I usually go on the backpacking trip in the spring, and I can go on a backpacking trip and walk away with quite a few images I'm happy with. It's also it's kind of a weird area up there in terms of, it's not like you have just like this one national park you're in. It's all these parks that are kind of broken up, and then some of them are kind of far from each other, and like the logistics get a little bit more tricky as far as where you're staying and where you're going. So I do want to go back, but I just love heading to southern Utah, and so it's a shorter drive, and it's kind of nice. I do have one thing I've been working on for the past half year or so. So I've had a 4Runner. I've had 2 Toyota 4Runners through the years. One was a 2004, one was a 2014. I recently sold the 4Runner. I have a Tacoma, and I just got like a little pop-up camper, a very lightweight pop-up camper to go on the back, which will make the trips a lot nicer to have like a clean indoor space at the end of the day, to have solar power, have a hot shower, stuff like that.
When you say it's a pop-up camper, is that like a caravan sort of idea? A trailed?
Yeah, so it just goes in the bed of the pickup truck and then
Oh,
just
I get it.
pops
Yes.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I've seen them. Yeah.
and they're very, very spacious on the inside. But this one weighs only like 400 something pounds, which is pretty lightweight for a camper. So I'm just kind of getting things set up with that. But that will make the trips a lot easier from the standpoint of having some more of the conveniences of home. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that will have an impact on the trips, because I have a tendency to wear myself out in the field. I'm like, from sunrise to sunset, I'm just on my feet all day around, just looking around, scanning around, finding stuff. After maybe 5, 6 days of that, maybe 3 days of that, my body's like, nope, you're
Yeah.
just going to sit still. You're just going to relax. You're going to rest. So I think having a place where I can take a nap might be kind of nice. So
That comes
there's
from another
that.
question actually from
Yeah.
Ian Meads. He says that sometimes your joy in the area is to do with it, like how relaxing and calm and restful the area is. Is it actually as restful as it looks in the videos and in the pictures when you're out there?
Yes and no. The moments when I'm taking the photos, definitely. That's because the camera forces you to like stay in one place and concentrate on something. Something magical about being underneath a dark cloth and like studying the composition. Those moments are indeed very, very calm. Um, and there's nothing really stressful about it. There's just, I think one thing that doesn't come through at all in the videos, and people will look at the videos and they say, oh, the hardest part must be, taking those videos where you're walking away from the camera and you got to come back and you got to get the camera. No, that's a chance to sit there and have a snack, and those are actually quite enjoyable. The hard part is the feeling that you have someone constantly looking over your shoulder, and the feeling that I need to be doing something productive, and so which is one of the reasons why I'm constantly like I'll go back to my, like on the backpacking trip, I'll go back to my campsite at the end of the day. I'll have dinner, and then I won't just sit at camp and lay in the hammock. I have to start scurrying around rocks and looking for things, and all the way until it's almost too dark to get back to camp. And I'll have like 40,000 step days on some of these trips, and I'm not getting enough calories to make up for that, and it wears me out. Um, so, but also when when I'm just wandering around, I find really cool stuff. So I
Yeah.
find something, I'm like, oh, that's a great subject right there. So it works really well. But what people don't see is they don't see constantly on my feet all day long. It is quite tiring in that sense.
Having your brain switched on for that long is tiring.
It is.
Mental energy. Yeah.
It is. And I've done some experiments where I did a trip, I didn't do any video, and I still had that feeling I need to be doing stuff, but I didn't have that feeling that someone is constantly like looking over my shoulder and expecting me to
Yeah.
produce things.
That's peculiar, but I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that, like in my mind, I have to think about like what did I do already today? What do I still need to do in order to make everything work out? Um, so not having that in the back of my mind would make, I think, the experience a bit nicer. With the new camper setup, my goal is to to have just like a day off when I go on the trip and just relax, enjoy, rest up a little bit. And I think that'll balance things out a little bit more, hopefully, at least. So
I remember Liz Dombrovskis telling me that Peter Dombrovskis used to hike in to the Tasmanian wilderness for a day typically, and then he would sleep for a day before he started taking photos. I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened, but I doubt it. But I
yeah,
mean, if you're carrying, Peter would always been carrying 40 plus pounds of
yeah,
gear, so 20 kilos or so, which is actually sounds about right to me. And that's that, if you're doing multi-day backpacking, and if you're carrying a 10-8, that's not a light camera, Ben, I don't imagine. Plus, if you are camping out, I'm not sure, maybe the camper hopefully would allow you not to do that, but I'm guessing that you typically would carry 40 to 50 pounds worth of kit on a day. And if you're
Every
doing
time I've been over 25 kilograms with camping on a 10.8.
exactly,
I've
and
been able to get it down actually significantly. I don't know what it translates to in kilograms, but I got my pack down to mid 30-pound range.
That's pretty good.
that's
Yeah, I
15
have like
kg. Yeah,
in the past maybe 10 years or so, there's a lot of extremely lightweight backpacking gear. So
Yeah.
like my tent weighs hardly anything. It just looks like a little pile of trash, you know. Um,
What do you
and
use, by the
so
way? What tent is it?
a Z packs.
Yeah.
So it's a one person tent, um, extremely lightweight. I have a Z packs backpack, which I carry the 8x10 and stuff, and the camera itself is pretty lightweight. I have I've purchased film holders in the past few years that are the Chamonix lightweight holders, which
The Chamonix are amazing, aren't they?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, they're absolutely amazing, and just all that stuff adds up. I also have to take the video kit, but I have it very minimal in terms of the video kit, um, and so I've gotten pretty good to the point where the weight really is not an issue. Like I never feel like, oh, I got to put this big pack on, you know. So thankfully, there's been some really big changes lately. And if I were not to have the camera gear with me, I would probably not feel like I'm wearing a backpack. It's really it's stuff's kind of expensive, but it's that definitely helps out a lot. But I can relate definitely to where you're talking about how, you know, he would say how you would go there and then he'd have hike and then have like, you know, a rest day. Those travel days in particular, those are difficult in terms of I get up really early. You know, I'm usually leaving my house by about 3 a.m. And then if I'm going to Zion, I usually get there by about noon or so. But if I'm going somewhere even further, you know, I might get there by evening time. But just like you have a travel day like that, which is it's hard on the body. It's a little bit stressful because you're kind of getting pulled from the comforts of home to all of a sudden being in this new place, combined with the fact that people are going to expect me to produce stuff that I'm happy with and kind of looking over my shoulder. And so usually like the first day of a trip, I just kind of pace around like, should I be doing this? Is this right? Like, is this what I'm meant to be doing? But usually after a good night's sleep, by the next day, morning comes, I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. But I definitely see how, you know, hiking into an area and just spending the day relaxing would probably open oneself to the opportunities around them and just kind of give that nice separation between the two spaces.
yeah. I think it's really fascinating because you know each person finds their own way of doing things, and of course, you know, thinking again, repeating Peter's example, Peter Dombrovskis. This is long before the days of YouTube and having to, you know, you've got to carry all the extra kit for one thing. But in Peter's case, you know, he was hiking into mountains with it being chilly and sometimes very wet as well,
Yeah.
and needing to take the kit that could keep you safe in those circumstances. So, you know, very different. Everything's different, and people have different ways of responding. I mean, I still do some backpacking occasionally. My recent trips have been with Alex Snail, and
Nice.
yeah, they're pretty hardcore, I have to
Oh yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's good for even an old guy like me to, you know, still realize what's involved in doing these trips. So a lot of admiration for what you do, and the physical side of it is a big part of it. And I think coming to terms with the physicality of the experience is also part of what makes the pictures look the way they do. And I think that, you know, it's the tiredness, fatigue, and feeling immersed. You know, those things go together as well, and that's sometimes forgotten. I think it is part of connecting with nature is realizing it's hard, it's difficult.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes to the classic thing of you appreciate most what you work the hardest for. And that's something where, sometimes, you know, if you do work really hard to take a photo, it doesn't necessarily mean that the photo is going to be good. But if you put everything into that photo, I think oftentimes it comes through in the image in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so that, and that also, like when I go on the trips, there's times when it's a bit miserable, just in terms of like, it just like, but I think within that sense of misery, I think that allows me to find subjects that I can relate to in one way or another. Like I might be a bit fatigued. I might be tired. I don't know, but I'll be hiking along and then I'll see something. I'm like, that tree looks like how I feel right now. So I'm going to take a picture of that tree. So I think sometimes when you do push yourself a bit to the limits, it gives that greater awareness of the things that are around you and allows you to kind of pick out those details. So that's I think another factor as well.
Bruce Percy had said that when he used to do his trips to Iceland every year, he'd had a couple of trips where he got ill, and he'd gone out feeling really down, and he said he came back with some of the best pictures he'd taken.
Yeah,
because
it
for
gives
some reason it was just in a different zone, and he just didn't have the bandwidth to get distracted.
It definitely is a different perspective. There's a photo I took in 2013 on the Big Bend area in Zion in the main canyon. I had a cold I was coming down with, and I think I had like a sciatica thing going on as well. And at the time, the gear I was carrying was significantly heavier, and I was miserable. But like there was like this dead tree in the ground. I'm like, that could be me. So I'm like, I gotta take a picture of this tree. It ended up being like a great looking photo. It's a photo I love, but I was absolutely miserable when I took it. But I think that very much factored into seeing that subject. I'm like, I feel you, tree. So I think there's something to be said about that.
Tim, were there any more questions from?
We did have an interesting question, which was from Edmund Maxvit, and his question is basically, what's circles of confusion?
That's very confusing.
And I'm going to expand on that a little bit, because you can find out what circles of confusion are a little bit online, but I think that there's an interesting one of that is, how technical does large format have to be in terms of all these things? Because anybody starting to look at it will see a minefield of different things to do with how to use the cameras.
Yeah, I think when people think of large format, they think of it being extremely technical. And yes, there's science to it. There's math behind it. But it doesn't have to be. Like I think there's a lot of times people get hung up on all these technical details and they lose sight of the whole goal, which is just to take a picture of something that hopefully makes people feel a certain way. I'm not very technical when it comes to the cameras. I do know about, to some degree, of the circles of confusion, and has to do with like the areas that are a little out of focus, and then depending on the size they're printed and looks like details, something like that, I think. But honestly, that doesn't really come into play too much for what I do. I do love the imperfect nature of large format, where rather than approaching it from a math or science sort of approach, if you just approach it from the standpoint of, here's a scene, I want to try to photograph it. I don't do much in the way of movements on the camera. I don't really get into that too much. I'm not worried if I don't have sufficient depth of field for a subject. I'll just get the most important parts in focus, and having some degree of imperfection to the work, I think, is actually what makes it more real. There's a scene I photographed in Death Valley this past winter. I was in this canyon. There's this reflected light in there, and there's kind of like this boulder in the middle of the canyon. And I knew that I would not be able to get everything in focus. But I just looked at it. I'm like, what's the most important part of the scene? It's the boulder. It's areas a little bit behind it more than what's in front of it. And so if you're to look at that photo, the boulder is sharp, the area behind it's sharp, the foreground's a little soft, but that actually just creates depth. I think if a person were to try to focus stack that, or kind of go through all the technical stuff with a digital to get it all in focus, it would be fine. I mean, it would look great, but I think having that imperfection can be nice. Um, a good chunk of my photos will have some areas that are not in focus that probably should be, but it's fine. It simplifies the image a little bit.
You can see it on a 10.8 transparency a lot clearer than you can see it on most things, can't you?
You really can. And I think going into it with the expectations that perfection does not exist, just get the most important parts, that builds so much more satisfaction with it. So I never really, the whole circles of confusion thing. I think maybe if a person's printing in the dark room, maybe that becomes a bit more of a thing in terms of doing like the really large prints and stuff. But I just accept that I'm going to have a shallow depth of field. I'm not too concerned about that. The only things that I do have to be very aware of when in the field is if I take a picture of a smaller subject and I need to overextend the bellows in order to get a close-up ability, I do have to do. I don't really have to do the math.
Stuff.
Yeah, you have to add extra exposure for those that aren't familiar with large format. You have to add extra exposure when you overextend the bellows, otherwise your picture turns out very noticeably dark. But even for that, I used to do math on that. I used to have a tape measure. I used to do a little calculation, and then on one trip I forgot the calculator, and so I was like on the sand on the floor of the canyon. I'm doing long division, and I'm like, this is not photography. This is not what I want to be doing right now. Now I use something called a quick disc, which is just like a little, a little circle that you can find a PDF on the internet, a little circle and like a little ruler. You just put the circle against your subject, go to the ground glass, measure it with the ruler, and it tells you exactly what the compensation is. So easy, except for if it's windy and it's a vertical surface. Sometimes you got to stick it on there or something, but no math required. So,
out of interest, do you subscribe to the Ansel Adams F64 and B there with the 10.8 camera?
I actually that is one of the other limitations I've run into. I do find that if I stop down beyond f45, I do hit diffraction in a bad way.
It does go away quickly, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there are certain things that certain like guardrails you learn. Like I shoot everything like f45 for the most part, and again, it takes like the thinking out of it. It's like, of course, it's going to be f45. It is what it is. But yeah, I don't. There are certain of those technical limitations that you do learn. You take a picture and like, well, this doesn't look quite right. Let's figure out how to make that better. But beyond that, I don't get too techie with it. I think if people were to look at the technique I use in the field as far as setting up the camera, they say, well, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. I don't care. I'm taking a picture of a rock. It's not architecture. So,
The large format photography forum wouldn't be happy with you.
I don't think they would. No, probably not. Yeah.
I was going to say the circles of confusion are what happens when a bunch of large format photographers get together and argue about.
A lot of confusion there. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really funny, isn't it? How I mean, I think there's you can approach the whole process with trying to be very precise, but ultimately it's a pleasure and the joy of using the instrument that makes it worth doing. And some of the limitations, the limitations that you've described so eloquently, Ben, make it the constraints that it gives you define the look of your work. And I think that f45 diffraction limit, that was very well explained, because I think there's another. You can see that. I mean, you can see that when you stop down. Even if you look at the ground glass screen, as long as it's bright enough, the subject that is, when you stop down. But probably with a smaller format, you wouldn't want to stop down even quite as far as that, because everything's relative to the amount of enlargement you need, right? There's a famous anecdote about Ansel Adams looking at Edward Weston, or describing Edward Weston's pictures. And Edward Weston typically did contact prints, so everything was contact printed. He didn't enlarge. Consequently, it didn't really matter what aperture he used, and so he would very often stop down to f128, whatever.
Yeah.
There on the lens to get the depth of field. And apparently Ansel said of him that none of Edward's pictures were actually very sharp. So, you can look at that as you, but does it matter? Of course, it doesn't matter, because the way they're
Exactly.
presented, they're brilliant pictures. They're innovative and of course, groundbreaking in lots of ways. That's much, much more important than whether they're sharp. And then one more thought is that I think it was Henri Cartier-Bresson said that sharpness is a bourgeois concept. So there you go.
Yeah. And there's very much an obsession with it because it's a tangible thing where people look at it, they want to have like the sharpest image, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be the best image. So I think that's definitely one of the things that I've come to embrace in terms of having something that's technically proficient from a standpoint that it doesn't look like an outrageous error, but from the but also the willingness to let things go if something isn't quite right. And so I think that is a huge part of being satisfied with your own work. Because if you're chasing perfection, if you're chasing something that doesn't exist, it's not a good pursuit. So it's all about taking a picture of something that makes a person feel a certain way, and in some cases, those imperfections I think kind of help with that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen to that.
I'll pick a last question for you because I know you work primarily in a small area and don't travel abroad. Don't really fly much. If you were forced to take a commission off the National Geographic to do a foreign project, where would you want to go? Do you think? Where appeals?
It would have to be a fair weather location because I wouldn't do well with wind or crazy weather.
Not Iceland, then. Yeah.
No, definitely not. I think my camera would be like tumbling down a beach somewhere and then get hit by an iceberg or something. I don't know. I think it would have to be an area that I would feel would be not too far from the conditions I'm used to working. So area with like some canyons and some reflected light and just some different stuff. So
interesting. Yeah.
I don't really know. I know that they have some really interesting sandstone stuff over in like Jordan and stuff. I know that I think Australia has some areas that have some canyons that have some really interesting earthy textures and some really interesting plants and stuff. So I don't know, but just the thought of the logistics of traveling with an 8x10 kit, it's just not. It's just the fact that like everything is great, X-rays, or or heat damage somewhere or something like that. So I don't have any plans to. The other thing too is I love returning to the same areas because I see something different every time.
Absolutely.
You learn the lay of the land, you learn the subtleties of the light, but each time I kind of go back, I find something a little different. So I kind of keep working these same areas and then finding other areas nearby. The canyon that I backpacked into this past spring, 2022 was the first year I went to that canyon. I think it's 2022. But I usually go back to the same canyon 5-6 years in a row. And then at some point I'm like, okay, I've exhausted this one from now. I'll move on to the next one. But there's just like the areas where I go, there's just like tons of these canyons. So I could spend a lifetime there, see new stuff, but still know the lay of the land and not have my film be massacred by X-rays or cameras destroyed by icebergs or,
do you see your environment change from year to year if you're going back?
It does. So there's an area in Death Valley with some mud flats that is really fascinating to revisit each year because every year it is different. Some years there's really big changes. We had, I think it was 2 years ago. Maybe there was a hurricane off the coast of Mexico, off the west coast, that kind of it broke up by the time it got to us, but it was just like a tropical storm. But it went up through San Diego, but mostly to the east of us. And then it just massacred Death Valley. And there was some crazy flooding that took out roads and stuff. But all the debris that got moved from all these flash floods it completely reworked the area. So, a storm like that goes through, and then all of a sudden it changes things quite dramatically. I've definitely seen that. Um, Fall has been really weird lately. Like the past 5 years or so, it's in Zion, it's staying warmer later. And so
Yeah.
like the fall color is being affected by that, not getting those cold nights to really get the color going. So I've seen changes in that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely changes where you go back, you may go to the exact same spot, but you're going to see something different. And I do like that about it, because it's from that change, usually you do have some opportunities that result from it. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. It's been really nice talking to you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been fun.